Hi, I'm Wayne Caddy. I teach at the School of Artisan Food. I've been baking for 27 years. I represented Team GB in the Coupe du Monde and the Masters de la Boulangerie too. I'm going to share with you some top baking techniques and recipes to take your baking to the next level. Okay, so we're on to mixing traditional tin loaves. We're going to mix by hand. It's a technique called autolays, and all that is simply adding flour and water, mixing that together for a couple of minutes by hand, and then leaving that to rest for at least 20 minutes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is simply add my water into the flour, and then I'm going to take my right hand, keep my fingers together and use it like a paddle, and just stir the water through into the flour. You don't really need to mix it a lot. It's actually just bringing the flour into the water so there's no visible dry flour left. And it's going to be a little bit sticky from time to time. And I'm also going to scrunch as well as I'm doing this. And the scrunching helps get the flour in and around. Okay, so then once I've got my flour in, I'm using the tips of my fingers. So don't worry if it's all sticky, it's supposed to be. Okay, so it's just a case of mixing that around till I can't see any flour whatsoever in the bottom of my bowl. So there we have it. We've got the dough, so there's no visible flour around that at all. The autolays isn't about mixing the dough at this stage, it's about the flour soaking up the water. So it doesn't matter if it feels coarse, it shouldn't be smooth. Autolays needs to rest for at least 20 minutes. It can be left longer, so it can be left for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and if we leave it longer, it reduces the mixing time. Finally, what we need to do is just scrape around the edges and place a shower cap over the top. If you haven't got a scraper, you could use a spatula. All we're doing really is taking the excess dough from around the edge, making sure it's going into the dough ball. And then we place our shower cap over the ball and allow it to rest. Okay, so after autolays, we're going to start mixing, and we're going to use a technique called around the clock. First thing we've got to do is remember to add the salt and the yeast, because remember autolays doesn't have those ingredients in. Okay, so the yeast goes in on the top, and then we're going to start the around the clock. So we're taking points from 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock and moving the dough ball around. Picking the dough up from the bottom and stretching it out. Because it's extensible after the autolays process, it makes it easier to knead. So we're just actually putting the yeast through so that the yeast disperses into the dough before we add the salt, because if you add salt and yeast together, the salt will kill the yeast. It starts to tighten up fairly quickly. So the next thing to do is add the salt, okay? And when you start mixing the salt through, it might feel as though it's a little bit sort of watery. Don't worry about that too much, that will disappear. Okay, so again, it's around the clock. So we're taking the dough and stretching it up. The salt actually tightens the gluten, so it makes it stronger. So salt's not just about enhancing flavour, it actually makes the dough stronger too. So we get to a point now where the dough's saying, actually, I'm really strong and tight now, can you stop kneading me? Once that happens, you should stop, cover the dough up and leave it for a couple of minutes, and then repeat the process 5 to 6 times until the dough's soft, silky, but importantly, strong. Okay, so we've repeated around the clock 5 or 6 times now, and the dough's physically changed. It's become stronger, silky, smooth. What we've got there is a lovely round dough ball that's very strong. Okay, that's what we're looking for in the gluten development. And we mustn't forget to cover the dough up, so we can use a shower cap. We're now going to leave the dough to rest for 1 to 2 hours to double in size. This is called bulk fermentation. Okay, so after bulk fermentation, we tip the dough out onto the work surface, and we're going to use a scraper to cut the dough into 2 equal halves, and we'll weigh these at 500 gram pieces. What we're going to do next is called shaping. So we shape the dough ball into a round, and we do this by pulling it forwards to ourselves like this and turning it 90 degrees until we form a nice tight ball. And then we can see the difference between the tight ball and then the unmoulded sort of ball is a lot looser. So this one's stronger, and this is how we put strength into the dough. So once we've shaped the dough balls, we give them a bench rest, and it's really important to cover them up with something. So it could be a sheet of polythene like we're going to use here. If you don't have polythene, you could use a carrier bag, a dampened tea towel. You could even use an inverted bowl, so you put the bowl over the top of the dough pieces. The important thing is don't get any drafts around the dough piece because the dough is going to skin over. Okay, so after bench rest, we uncover the tin loaves. So final shaping involves degassing the dough. So we're going to flatten out the dough piece so it's elongated and it forms an oval shape. Form an apex at the top of the loaf and then roll it over, tucking it in till we form a nice cylindrical shape, and then use the gate technique. So we've got our hands overlapped to draw it forwards to ourselves, turn it round again and draw it towards ourselves, tuck the edges in a little bit, and we're going to hold the tin loaf like this with the seam on the bottom and the smooth part on the top and place it into the tin. The tin has had a little bit of sunflower oil greased around the edges so that the loaf doesn't stick. Once we've finally moulded the tin loaves, all we need to do is remember to place a shower cap over the top of the tin loaf, form a little bit of a peak so that when the dough doubles in size it doesn't stick to the top of the shower cap. Leave this to proof for 1 to 2 hours until it's doubled in volume. So we take the shower cap off, and then we've got some white flour, and we're going to use our sieve, and we're simply going to make sure we get a nice even dusting of flour over our loaves. And then we're going to what we call score our bread. So we're going to have a really sharp blade. The key to scoring the bread is quick movements and letting the blade glide across the loaf. So we're going to make some incisions into the loaf very quickly, going across the loaf. Okay, we're not digging the blade down into the loaf, we're letting the sharpness of the blade cut across the loaf. Once we've got our tin loaves ready for the oven, it's really critical we get steam in there. So the way I tend to do it is we get a preheated tray in the bottom of the oven, a glass of water, and we tip the water into the preheated tray so that it forms steam. It's really, really important though that we put our loaf in before we do that, otherwise we open the door, we'll lose all of the steam. However, on this mealer oven there is an inbuilt steam function which makes it very, very simple to use and gets great, great, great crusty breads. All we do is present the jug of water into the system and it will take in the water from the jug, and all we do is press a button and it injects it straight in there. Okay, so now the tin loaves are ready to come out of the oven. They've been in there for 35 minutes and we're going to take them out. See, we've got a great volume out of these. So when we're taking the tin loaves out, just tap the corner and it should just pop out the tin really easily. And here we are, 2 beautiful tin loaves. Light, crispy, caramelised, 2 good examples of tin loaves.